I think it's been enormously difficult for all of us. And I think yesterday was a real moment to come together and pay respect to the enormous courage of Zelensky and all his people. Because what we have seen is a peaceful country, one that I was in only 5-6 weeks ago, who have been forced to take arms to defend themselves against an aggressor. And it is right that we paid respect to him, but also that we listened to his wishes. And I think all of us were really deeply moved yesterday in the chamber. And it's absolutely right that myself and Chris Bryant had invited him to do that appearance. And I'm really pleased we were able to make that happen.
Ellie Reeves from Labour. Ellie.
I think that
I think the fact is there are nuclear weapons and they are here to stay. I don't think it's worth having these conversations about hypotheticals about what if we were to get rid of them or whether we should. The fact is we are facing a potential nuclear war. The fact is that Russia and Putin have nuclear weapons and they have a great number of warheads. And the fact is, without question, that it is a NATO nuclear alliance that will keep us safe. It is a NATO nuclear alliance that we are part of, which is the cornerstone of our defence for all things around the world. So the facts are that it is nuclear that are keeping us safe, and it is nuclear that is making Putin pause and not want to get into direct conflict with NATO or with the UK. And that is a fundamental reality that I don't think anyone should be trying to excuse or disappear away.
Ellie.
I think, unfortunately, we're past the point of no-fly zone. And this breaks my heart, and it's really difficult because as I questioned the Foreign Secretary when she appeared before the Foreign Affairs Committee earlier this week, if the intelligence was so sure from early January that there was going to be an invasion, were there considerations about preemptive deterrence? Were there discussions about putting in a no-fly zone in advance? The government and NATO partners have been very clear for a very long time now that they're not going to put in place a no-fly zone. I think it's very important to recognise that as an MP, I am not sat here with the intelligence that allows me to say that we absolutely can push forward with a no-fly zone. And anyone who thinks that anyone should be calling for that without having seen the intelligence, I'm afraid is mistaken. I used to have access to that intelligence, and that's why I'm so sure that you should have that in front of you. The fact is that NATO have made the decision they've made. I don't have access to the reasons why they've made those. And therefore, we have to focus on what meaningful things we can do to protect, save lives and limit bloodshed, recognising that, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Look, I've been one of those MPs who's been very clear that we should be opening and providing refuge to every single Ukrainian that we can. It is women and their children who are fleeing, women and children who don't know if their husbands and their fathers are going to be alive in a day or a week. We should be providing refuge in every single way we can. And on the 200,000, if not every Ukrainian wants to take up the 200,000, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely their right. And the Ukrainians I speak to want to stay as close to Ukraine as possible because a lot of them want to be near to their loved ones. But we should be opening our doors to anyone who needs refuge. Yeah, and we need to move faster. And one of the ways that I think we could be moving faster is doing what's called rewashing biometric data. So rather than asking people for new biometric data, if they've been in the UK or to essentially a force that we can provide access to, we should be rewashing them. And there was a real problem with people having to travel too far to get refugee status and visas. I believe that is now genuinely being tackled. There are teams in Calais, there are teams in Lille, there are teams all across. I've been speaking to my former Foreign Office colleagues who around Eastern Europe, they are all running visa centres and making sure people can apply. The job now is to get those visas done as quickly as possible.
It's a staggering lack of force.
Look, I think we could have gone faster. I've made that point. The military have now been deployed by Ben Wallace to use their expertise in what we saw in the Arab scheme and the Afghanistan evacuation. We need to move faster. And my focus is very much on the looking forward about what more we can do, what more I can propose and push for that will speed things up.
Ellie.
Look, the world has changed over the last 2 weeks.
That's it.
And I don't think people fully appreciate just how much the world has changed. And oil and gas, that they are going to be some of the fundamentals. And that is why I think the world has been quite cautious about bringing in energy and gas sanctions, because the fact is they were going to hurt us so badly. And they're crucial because that's how Putin raises his revenue. But we are trying to now undo decades and decades of failed energy policy. And that can't be done overnight. And there have to be some very serious conversations about what that means.
Windfall tax?
look, windfall tax is something inherently I'm not particularly comfortable with.
But the world has changed.
Everything has to be on the table for consideration. And at this point, I would take no options out. That doesn't mean I would be going for it, but we should be looking at all options. We have to be looking at alternative gas and oil supplies, which are very difficult, because even if we got rid of all Russian supplies immediately and replaced them with China's, China wouldn't be able to fill the gap that's been left behind. Lots of countries that are the big oil producers, like Syria and Iran, are sanctioned. We've got to look at alternatives like the Dutch or Azerbaijan or North Africa. Then we've got to look at the impact in terms of fertilizer, the impact on food, the impact on wheat. The world has changed and the costs are going to be substantial. But I have to say, yes, we need to do everything we can to make sure that people don't feel this biting at home too much. But ultimately, I know that my constituents, their priority is making sure we see an end to the bloodshed. And so they recognise that, yes, it's going to hurt, but they also want to see the bloodshed stopped. I know that across government, there's lots of energy discussions taking place. The rising prices will be affecting everyone across Europe because we are part of the European gas market, which means we pay for gas at the European price marketplace. There's going to be lots of pressures on energy throughout. The good thing is we don't get any of our petrol from Russia. But obviously we will have to look at the industries who are most affected and look at what we need to do to support them. But there will not be a sector in this entire country that isn't affected. Farmers are going to be affected. Those who produce fertilizers are going to be affected. Shops are going to be affected. You name it. Almost every industry in this country is going to be affected in some way. So yes, there will need that energy unit to be looking specifically at what we do for hauliers and all other industries. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we as MPs kick in. This is what MPs do day in, day out that many people don't realise. We get the phone calls from the 80-year-old widow who's having problems, and we sit down with them and we go through their financials and we work out what additional support that they can get. And there are lots of things that have been put in place, whether it's a non-repayable £150 cash rebate for homes in council tax bands A to D. There's been a £200 rebate on energy bills for all households, discretionary funding for local authorities, the warm homes discount, winter fuel payment scheme. There are lots of things happening, the cold weather payment scheme, but obviously those were put in place before we knew that we were going to have to bring these economic strikes against Russia. And so the work will now be putting in place to see what more could be done. But this is an issue across Europe. This is not unique to us. And therefore we will also be working with our allies to learn from them what they're suggesting, and they will learn from us, and we will work together to see how we minimise the impact of this. And actually, that is where we really need to see the EU step up. So if the UK and US sanction Russian oil, as we're proposing to do, there is a risk that will just raise the cost of oil, and Putin will be able to sell less oil for more money. We need the EU and others to step in and to sanction oil, because that is where 40% of Europe gets its oil, its gas and its coal from, and 30% of its oil. Okay. We need the EU and others to step in, or else we will bear the brunt and they will not. Well, I wasn't even an MP when Berko was here as Speaker, but anyone from the outside has seen how poorly he's behaved. And every single person every week in Parliament talks about, in my first few months, talked about how lucky we were not to have someone who was such a bully. And Labour nominated from him for a peerage. I mean, I'm sorry, but we all knew who he was, whether we were in politics or where we weren't.
Gavin Williamson has just been... I'm not saying Gavin Williamson's a bully, but he's not a man famous for his competence. We could talk about the peerage system.
No, but I don't walk around being told that he's a bully.
No, I said that. I said that. No, I'm just you mentioned the peerage system. I mean, all sorts of odd bods and sods get nominated for peerages. But this doesn't come as a surprise to you.
No, because as I said, literally from my first week, everyone's saying, don't worry, Lindsay Hall, the Speaker's fantastic. He'll be really easy to work with. Thank God you don't have to deal with Berko. He was such a bully. He hated women. And things like, Lindsay called me very early on when I first got elected on a foreign affairs issue. And everyone said, wow, how did you get called so early? And I asked him, and he said, because I call people based on their expertise, not based on, some sort of privilege or how long they've been here, or because... any other reasons that perhaps Berko might have called people. So yes, I'm very lucky that I've only had Lindsay and his wonderful deputy speakers.